Welcome. I'm so excited to start our first podcast, right? My name is Amber Harris. I am known as the Helper's Helper, right? And I'm just, like I said, I'm excited to be here. This is our first one. Um, I am a licensed social worker and therapist, trained in trauma and some other things, but we don't need to know about all of that, right? Um, we're real on this podcast, right? We're going to be who we are. That's why vulnerability is the vibe, right? Vulnerability is so important. It's really being able to show up and be seen, right? And it's also being authentic with who you are. So every week when we come together, that's our focus. Just being vulnerable, right? So today, myself and my co-host Lane will be vulnerable, even in our conversation that we share with you today. Let me tell you a little bit about this podcast, right? Because y'all can keep tuning in, right? Don't y'all want to hear me every month, right? So every time we're starting on these podcasts, we're all about really educating you a little bit, giving you a little bit of education, right? Empowering you, and then just encouraging you, right? Being a helper is a lot. Let's just be being helper is a lot. So I want to make sure that we are supporting you all in this journey of helping others, right? And not just helping others, but helping you, because the better you are, the better helper you become or continue to build into, right? So we're today we're going to talk about empowered thinking, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but we'll cover so many other topics, self-care and moral distress, burnout, right? um Communication. I mean, the list goes on. Those are just some of those. And really, it's going to be important for us to always give you some steps, right? Some actionable items, because we can talk all day long, right? And you all have been through trainings, quote unquote, or sat on podcasts. You like great information, awesome. And then you say, well, what am I supposed to do? Right? And so we want to make sure that we give you some actionable items to help you work on the topics that we are talking about. Right. And then we also will focus on some specific populations, right? Working with Black helpers specifically. And like we said, just the helping professional in general. Like I said, I'm excited to be here. Vulnerability is a vibe, right? Before I introduce the topic, I want to let Lane introduce herself.
Thanks, Amber. I'm so glad to be here. You did a great job just kicking us off and kind of giving us an overview, listeners an overview of what to expect with this new podcast as we move forward in the coming months. We are very excited to be launching this, and I'm so honored to be the first guest. I will not be appearing on this podcast every time, but I am so excited to be here for the first episode. And yeah, just if you haven't gotten a chance to listen to any of our other podcasts or Joy Society events, I will just briefly kind of give some background on who I am and why I'm here. I do have a background in helping and being a helping professional. I do have my social work license as well as like Amber, and I have a background with clinical work and mostly working with children who have experienced trauma. And through that experience, I did suffer burnout, and I
Mm.
dealt with a lot of the negative repercussions that a lot of helpers out there are dealing with in being not well yourself while trying to help others become well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I met Dr. Joy, who is the founder and CEO of Joy Society, and the reason that both of us are here today. And started learning a lot more about my holistic well-being and how to be a better helper by being a better me. And
Mm-hmm.
that is really the foundation of where this podcast and all of the work in Joy Society comes from. So Amber is there's no better person to be leading a podcast for helpers than our helper's helper, Amber. So she has a lot to offer and a lot to share on these topics, and I'm excited to learn today too about empowered thinking. So what do you have for us, Amber?
Thank you, Lane. So, anytime I'm thinking about negative thinking, right, we're going to get into, and let me just give you a brief overview, right? Is like, that song that plays in your head over and over and over and like again, and you're like, it will not get out, and you keep singing it over, and you're like, okay,
And it's
how do
usually
I,
a song you don't even like that much.
one of the commercials, right? Or it's one of
Yes,
the,
yes.
Safe Flight Repaired, right? Something that you hear all day, you're like, get it out. And,
Right,
and you
right.
try to get away from it, right? Then all of a sudden something happens and you're back into that. That's
Mhm.
really like our negative thinking, right? We really want to help you use your mind. All of us too. Um, Not playing that negative, the song that you don't want played in your head, but the song you love, the song that
Mhm.
empowers, the song that encourages, right? You want to start to learn when we get into this empowered thinking, how do I manage my mind so I'm playing the song I want to hear,
Mm.
not the song that I don't like, right? So, like I said, we're going to get into more of this topic and just us being vulnerable in this topic. But I want to give you a little bit of data because I like to share a little bit. We have between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day, right? Now, this is crazy, you all. 80% of those thoughts are negative.
Wow.
80%. And then, okay, well, if that's not bad enough, 95% are repetitive. So you saying the same thing over and over to yourself, right? And
Mhm.
some of them is things we have learned, some of the things that we have told ourselves over the time, right? So when we think about that, the best way to change anything is to first look at those thoughts. What's those thoughts looking like, right? What's happening in our mind, right? What statements have we been giving ourselves? And so we're going to get into all of that, and share some things with you all, as we go on. Because the more we can look at our thinking, the more we can empower others in their thinking. Because if you change your thinking, you change your behaviors and how you then feel, right? And it can go in different orders, but those are changing your thinking can change an outcome, and that it to me is empowering all by itself. So, um, I want to let's rate our thinking right now, Lane.
Yeah.
How's your thinking? What would you rate your thinking at?
I would say today, because it does change every day. It changes even more, like multiple times in a day. If I'm saying, let's say, one is you're in a really bad, you're in a bad place. 10 is you're in a great place. I'd probably put myself today at a 6,
Okay.
which is a little lower than I would like to be, obviously, and lower than I typically would be. I think, I have this big trip coming up, and I leave
Mhm.
on Sunday, and I'm super excited for it, and I feel pretty prepared for it, but it's still just there's so much of that like repetitive thinking going on, making sure that I have the things checked off
Mhm.
that I need to do. So it's like this same to-do list keeps popping up in my head,
Mhm.
and that's cycling. And even when I tell myself, okay, well, I've done all the I'm doing all of these things, or I write
Mhm.
it down and say, maybe I can't do it today, but I have to do it on Sunday before we leave.
Yeah.
I think that I have to keep thinking about it in order to not forget to do it, when really I know
Mhm.
that the repetitive thinking is just making me feel anxious about the trip versus like actually helping me get stuff done. Of course, like there are times where I need to like actually think about things repetitively in order to get them done. But
Mhm.
this is not that. And so I'm trying to like bring myself back to the present moment every time I get in that repetitive cycle. But
Mhm. Mhm.
but because of the situation, because of where I'm at right now, and because of something that I'm embarking on in a few days, like my positive thinking level is like a little bit lower than I would like.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So when I think about rating our thinking, so one would be like, oh, yay, it's just rainbows, everything's great and grand. I have a great
Oh, okay.
thinking. Or we could do 10 because we did 10. Never mind, that could be 10. Look,
Okay, okay. I was
that's
like,
10.
okay, well that
Rainbows
changes a
and
little bit
great,
of what I
everything's
No,
awesome,
I
right?
got it. Got it.
And then
Yes.
one is stinking thinking. When I
Mhm.
talk to people about stinking thinking, is now the thinking I believe it to be so. It's so much now, it's embodied in me that
Mm.
this thought is so deep within me, right? And so all of you even listening, think about where your thinking's at, and remember, we're being vulnerable. This is this is where the awareness is where the first step, right, is where is my thinking? Let me pay attention to that. What are my thoughts looking like, right? And so, and then, like I said, 10 is like, oh, everything's great. And so, thanks for sharing, that you were a 6. And I would say, as I'll rate mine, and then we'll go
Yeah.
into some other things. I would say I am a 7. And as over the last few weeks, going through a lot of things that are out of my control, I am proud to be a 7, right? I
Yeah.
am proud to be a 7. The same things, um, you know, just like, say you're getting ready for a marathon, right? You're preparing for a marathon, and you don't just run the marathon. You don't be like, oh, I'm going to do, all of these miles, right? I'm going to go do 13 miles. This is 26 miles. Sorry.
Yeah. No, there's no way you can just like pop on, like just pop into a marathon and be good.
Well, you can't do that. So it's important to train for it. With your thinking, if we're having all of these thoughts, you have to train for positive thoughts. You have to be working on it all the time, so that when you're in stuff that is bigger and crisis, that you're ready to use it. But it's also being aware, like, where am I seeing these thoughts at? What is happening, right? Um, and so I think for us right now, Lane, is really talking about where we are seeing those negative thoughts
Right.
come up more often. Let's kind of get into that. Like, where are you seeing it? What's happening? And then how it impacts, I'm sorry, Lane,
Yeah. Yeah.
then how it impacts you personally and professionally, right?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
this is a great conversation. And as you're talking, I just keep thinking about why this is so complex for helpers. And as a helper, and even though I'm not doing clinical work right now, like still I operate in a helper mindset much of the time, even within this work and in my personal life. And we don't just turn off that piece of us, but it is so it's something that I've struggled with a lot, is that I know a lot of the techniques that are used in therapy. I know a lot of the clinical techniques that might be helpful for people and for clients who are struggling with negative thinking patterns. And yet, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm just immune to these issues and immune to these same patterns. And so I remember, working with, and I don't know, this might be slightly off topic from what you asked, but I do remember working with a young teenage girl, and this was a couple years ago, and she was struggling with some pretty severe anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was doing some very typical CBT kind of work with her, and talking about the thoughts that go on in her head, and like how it makes her feel when she has those thoughts, and like where do you feel it in your body when you have that thought? How can we
Mm-hmm.
change this thought to a positive thought? And it's like I would come home and realize that because I've spoken about this in other podcasts with Joy Society. I do struggle with anxiety, and I have had this struggle for much of my life, and I am in a really great place right now with it. But that doesn't mean that I am just immune now to anxious thoughts or repetitive thoughts. And anxiety really does look like that. It looks like you have the same thoughts over and over, and usually they're about the future, something about the future that you're worried about. And so, I would come home from working with these clients who, like her, like the girl I just mentioned, and, others who would be working on similar things. And I would come home and realize, like, I'm dealing with some of that same stuff. And yet I did not think that I was deserving of the same kind of support or the same kind of like solutions that I would maybe like help a client see. And I think part of that, for me is like this other negative thinking pattern that I think a lot of helpers struggle with, which is I don't have it as bad as such and such client, or I'm not suffering as much as my clients are, because, you're working with a lot of people who are in severe trauma or severe, mental health. And I think, it just seems to me like we continuously we continuously tell ourselves that someone else has it worse off than us, and we're seeing that every single day in our jobs, so that eventually we start to feel like we're fine and that there's nothing to even work on for us because we don't have it as bad. So we live in this state of like we're not living to our full potential because we think that just because we're functioning and that we're like doing better than such and such client, that we're good, or that we don't even have the time or energy to focus on ourselves because we're putting so much into the clients and because they need it more, because we're not deserving of this. We're not deserving to feel better than we feel right now. So to me, those are, and I'm saying this as a more general kind of description of why I, the thoughts that I have, and to answer your questions, what are the, just to be vulnerable about, like, what are the thoughts that I have? And I think they do stem a lot of times from this, and I've been on a journey to try to recover from some of this, like, I guess, thinking that I've been somewhat taught to think based on like what is expected of helpers and helping professionals within our different agencies and organizations, and even the way that we're taught in school. But like, for us to feel like we should not focus on ourselves in certain ways in order to have more of our time and energy for our clients. And there's, we could go on and on about that, but for me, it really does feel like the repetitive cycle is a little bit of like, well, it could be so much worse. So let me just focus on the fact that I'm able to do this and this, and that I'm like not suffering as much as as much as I know that humans can suffer. So I'm probably good. And let me just kind of like push that feeling down or push the negative feelings away, and I'll be fine, like just keep doing what I'm doing. When really I know that deep down, I know that there is a better experience, and I know that that I deserve to have better and be better. But it's that constant conditioned thinking that I keep struggling with, and it keeps coming back. What do you think, Amber?
Well, I was just, as you're talking, the shoulds. I should, I
Mm.
should, I should, right? Or what ifs. We get stuck in these thoughts, right? Oh, I should have got this done, right? Oh, I should have done this. And so now we're not thinking about anything that we did. We're not thinking about, we're just, oh, I should, right? Or what if, right? And in reality, we, first off, if we're not in the present, we're not in our present mind. It's a whole other issue. But the shoulds, I think, is probably the hardest thing. And that's probably what I have struggled with, is the shoulds. Like, oh, I have a to-do list that's already unrealistic, and I'm like, well, and then I get done. I'll go down the list and I'll get 10 things done, right? But there's 30 things on the list, but I got 10 things done. Oh, I should have did this. Well, should you? You got all these other things done, right? And so right away, I've already discontinued what I did do. I've already, and what thought, that negative thought that continues, that's come, that I've dealt with growing up, and to this day, that I have to continue to battle, is the, am I enough?
Mm.
Being enough, right? And so sometimes, if you've had these thoughts over time, it puts you right back into this negative thought pattern, right? And so this is why awareness is important, right? So I know, I'm like, wait a minute, I have to literally stop myself in that thought and do something different. And so that is so important. And you brought up another point which I wanted to talk about, because thinking about why helpers struggle, right? Why helpers struggle with this. And you talked about, oh, well, I'm doing okay, right?
Yeah.
Um, Even that idea of what is better, like who defines what is better?
Right.
Who defines how, you know, someone, if we're doing better or not, then who defines that? And so right away, we're already messed up with our thoughts,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because we're already thinking like, I should be doing better. You know, what is better? What is
Right.
better? And understanding as a helper is, it's not our job to save, heal, fix. anyone. Our job is to support, empower, encourage people for their journey to get where they want to be, right? And so it's important as we, even when we're thinking, right? If we keep our thinking in line as a helper too, that helps us stay in that space. But it's also easier said than done. We're sitting here saying this. I'm like, that's a lie, because it's hard on our
I
to
know.
do it, right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, we want to help, right? We want to do these things. And I definitely, when I started to do this work early in my early years, I think I'm still young,
You are.
till my knees stop working. But other than that, I feel like, I'm pretty pretty good. But to really be like that, like you were talking about, how that weight carries your, and then you're thinking about them like, oh,
Yeah.
what, and then so you're thinking about what you should be doing, how you should be helping them, and then that's overtaking nothing about you, but how you should be helping someone
Right.
else. And so, we talk about the helper's high, we talk about all these other things that happen as a helper, but it's so important to understand that our importance of us. So changing, first off, being aware that, okay, I'm sitting in these thoughts that I can't distance myself from my job and what I do, my profession is something we should be aware of. And how do I do that? Right. But also thinking about why else helpers struggle with their own mindset, right? Not they'll tell all day. Look, myself, like I said, I've done this for a long time. I'm like, well, this is what you should work on, and then I'm over here like, looking at my to-do list and saying just like what I just said, but telling them, you did a lot. You are doing this, right? Encouraging them, and then I'm over here beating myself up.
Exactly.
Right? So
That's the classic problem with helpers.
right?
I mean, yeah, if we knew if we were able to embody everything that we knew we quote should be doing, or that we would tell a client to do, or support a client in doing, we would all be living our best lives. But look out and see what helper out there is living their best life. I mean, they exist, but we know that helpers are really struggling. That helping professions are really struggling.
Yes. Well, and I think that's and really worth thinking about our mind and how we are looking at even what we are doing. I worked in foster care and adoption most of my career, right? So that was a tough, working in that field for a long time, and feeling like, oh, I should be doing, once again, I should be doing more. Always sat here, right? And I'm holding this, but then I'm like, and then we have our own stuff too, right? We have our own things that we're dealing with, but we're like, I should be doing this. And when does why is this should more important than this so-called should? Right. Or is these shoulds even that important? When I even think about shoulds, or is it, when I think about, is it, like we think about being present, is it not a should? Is it just what it is in that moment? What can, and we talk about, thinking control is so important in that, right? And so, understanding there's things that we can control and there's things we can't control. One of the things we can work on controlling is, how am my thoughts handling this situation? And does it make sense, right? And so I think really being vulnerable in that is important. And also being real with yourself. Like, no, I just had literally before I got on this call, Lane, I got to get some water, y'all, because my mouth's dry. So literally before I got on this call, like I said, I've been going through a lot of stuff. My sister just passed away. So that has been a lot of, unexpectedly, a lot of things that I cannot control. Period. There's nothing I can control about it. Had to make decisions, take care of stuff. And I'm like, and I was talking to somebody and I was like, I gotta work, right? And they're like, everyone, I said, I need money because, and I said, I can't be broke out here, right? And then I was like, no. And I said, I can't, I don't even want to put that into my language, right? I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even want that as a thing. Like, I'm working on building my money back up, right? That in my mind, I'm working changing even what I say about it, because if that's a thought, and that continues to happen in my mind, I'm not going to make strides to handle my money or do things differently.
Right.
And so I think understanding that is important, like catching yourself. It's like that. What was that? What was that thought looking like? Right. I remember having to make a wall about we just talked about my to-do list, right? So I had and I just took it down because I feel like I'm good now. I've been really paying attention to what I did and not what I didn't do. But I had a wall that I put up, and I would say it was my all I do is win wall, right? And so I put posties up. What did you do today? Not what you didn't do. What did you do today? So I kept looking at what did I do and how that started to feel, right? That made a big difference for me because I could see it. And we'll get into some things that you can do. But Lane, is there some things like when you're thinking about some of your um, negative thoughts as a helper, and then
Yeah.
personally that maybe you haven't shared or you would like to share before we kind of get into some tips of things that they can do?
Yeah, no, I'm excited to hear your tips and just the way that I mean, I know generally what you're going to say because we talked about it, but I also am just interested in how you will phrase it and just your thoughts on this, but not to make a pun about it, but I'm interested for your thoughts on this. But I yeah, it is interesting. I think it just the whole like being vulnerable about what really are these thoughts. I think at the root of it you've hinted at what they are, and I think generally like most of the time the root is the same for us all, and the root is that the shoulds, we have a lot of those, we all have those. I
Mm-hmm.
should be doing this, I should be doing that. The worry about the future, what ifs,
Mm-hmm.
what is going to happen next, what am I prepared for whatever's going to happen. And then the kind of more self-talk thoughts that are negative, so the things like I'm not worthy, or I am not good enough, I am not doing enough, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
capable, or like I mean, I could go on and on about these negative self view thoughts that we have. So, I have all those. I mean, to be honest, like,
Mm-hmm.
I cycle through a lot of these kinds of thoughts, like, and personally and professionally. Professionally it shows up as maybe like I'm not qualified. I don't feel like I'm actually
Yeah.
qualified to like be helping this person or to be doing this work. And we could probably do a whole one on imposter
Yeah.
syndrome. We've talked a lot about that, you and I, but those thoughts are real in my professional life, and in my personal life the same kind of thoughts come up. Like, not necessarily I'm not qualified to do this or that, but I'm not good enough
Mm-hmm.
to be to have this or that, or I'm not being a good partner, or maybe I'm not being a good dog mom, or like I'm not taking care of my pets in the best way that I could, or like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not calling my mom enough, or I'm not, and all of those thoughts, just at the root are like the negative view of self and the I shoulds and the what ifs. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where I feel like it sits for me. So I'm interested. Yeah, what are your thoughts on, and yet and we're not going to go into too much specifics, I know, on like solutions in this podcast, because people will have to tune in to the training for that. But
Yes.
what are your thoughts to kind of leave members with after they've listened to us?
I'm going to start with this. Mind control is a superpower. Let me just give you that. Mind control is a superpower. So the goal is to be able to control our mind, right? And the power that it has in that. And yes, you guys come to the training. I'll give you a lot of tips there. But there's to be able to do that, you cannot fight your mind with your mind. You're like, oh, well, no, Amber, no, oh, right, right. You're trying to fight your mind, control your mind by staying in your mind. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work. If you don't take anything else from this podcast, is you have to do something different. Physically do something different, right? I say if you move your say things out loud, do something different with your body to help combat your thoughts. So if you're having, like I said, negative thoughts, that I gave this whole example of the list and how I created the word wall, that now I don't need the wall now that says all I do is win, because I've worked specifically on that, right? I had to do something different. Okay. So thinking about that, making sure, what can I do differently to combat my negative thoughts? How do I stop that song playing in my head over and over again? You have to do something different. That would be my tip first, is just being aware and then doing something different, and understanding mind control is a superpower. And to me, that gives me, I'm like, oh, I want all the power. I want all the power then. So if I can control my mind, I am powerful. And so that would be my last tip. But Lane, do you have a couple of tips that
Yeah. No, I think that for me, the way that you put that is really good. And I, something that I have had to do is to focus on getting out of my mind when I am in that place. So again, like a lot of my repetitive thoughts happen at night when I'm in bed, and trying to go to sleep. And when I get in that mindset, I know that no matter what logic I use and what I tell myself, nothing's going to really help, because I'm then just kind of going further into my mind by continuing to like say more things to myself, whether I try to fight my negative thoughts with positive thoughts, that's still just like more fighting going on in my head. So something that I've done is exactly what you said, which is just kind of try to get out of my head. So some that looks different for everyone. Sometimes like I'll listen to a meditation or like listen to something that I can focus on, or read a book, do something just actually to get out of my head. Whether it's, you stand up and you go outside and you just distract yourself, just disrupt yourself for a moment and just get out of your head. Because, and then the other thing I was going to say is, for me, the word control doesn't really resonate. So for some members, it might not, saying control your mind might not, you can use whatever words you want to use. So, in theory, it really is about getting in control of your mind. But I think for me, it's about accepting and being present with myself, no matter what is going on in my mind at the time. So it's like an acceptance of, okay, this is a thought. And just, you see it and you let it pass. So I see it and I don't put judgment on it. Like, I had that thought. Okay. That is a thought I had, and that's it. It's not a bad thought. It's not a good thought. It's just a thought. And then, those things don't know that doesn't always work. Again, that's where you might have to disrupt yourself and just get out of your mind. But the practice is to continue doing that over and over, to where it becomes more second nature, so that when you do have these thoughts that have a negative feeling associated with them, that you don't allow yourself to even entertain that negative feeling, because you're just seeing that thought as what it is. All it is a thought. It's not necessarily anything good or bad. So those are my kind of final tips for members. And yeah, Amber is going to be giving us a lot more in the next couple of weeks. So do you want to kind of tell members about what to look forward to in the next couple of weeks?
Yes, I'm excited, because this, like I said, this is just the icing. Not the icing. This is just the intro. We're like just starting to bake the cake, right? We're going to give you a little bit right now. But we will have a training in a couple weeks all about empowered thinking, where we can really go through some specific things, give you some more information, right? We talk about educating you right at the beginning. That's all about what we like to do, educating and empowering you. But so it's our training, all about what can I do? What does that look like? So first, being aware, helping individuals become aware of that, like what's happening. And so paying attention to that. So you can disrupt. We talk about that word disruption a lot. So you can disrupt those thoughts and combat it with something different, right? And so we'll have that in a couple weeks. And then after that, which is the most awesome thing, is you can, in a few weeks, I think probably the last week of the month, I think we're doing it. I don't know. You guys have to sign up. I don't know what to say. You got to sign up for Joy Society so you know what's happening, right? And we will have a coaching session all about empowered thinking. So then that's a space where you're like, oh, Amber, Amber, right? This is where I'm struggling. And so we can really give you more specific ways to handle, and combat our negative thoughts, which to me is awesome, because it's sometimes you're like, oh, you touched on all these things, but I'm having this one thing. Can you help me through this, right? And that we'll have a group coaching session where we can really talk, and other helpers will be there, so we can all kind of have this conversation about how do we work on this, right? How do we get through these negative thoughts? How do we prepare ourselves, right? So I'm excited about those other pieces. Like that.
Yeah, sign up for Joy Society.
Yes,
It's all free. It's all free in the community right now. So if you get in there, and you will have access to all of those things that Amber just mentioned, the upcoming trainings and coachings, that you'll get a lot more from her and from the rest of us in there. So please, sign up, and we will see you next time.
yes. Thank you all. See you soon.